Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan and welcome to Words in Time. Now in today's video, I'm going to be doing a sci-fi version of the Imagine If book tag, an original book tag created by Books with Emily Fox. I think it's a really fun idea, so go check out her channel. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description below. Here's how it's going to work. I have written down the names of 20 sci-fi books and put them into my Pal's City of Books hat. I have also put in the names of 20 different authors. I'm going to pull out a book, then pull out an author, and imagine what that book would be like if it had been written or rewritten by this different author. And I'll let you know whether I think it would be better or worse than the original one. So let's find out what crazy combinations we end up with. All right, so first up we have, let me see, Foundation. What if Foundation had been written by Christopher Ruocchio? Okay, that's kind of an interesting combination. I think the Sun Eater series does have a little bit of a Foundation influence in a way where we have this galactic spanning empire, but Christopher Ruocchio has a lot more interesting characters, more action. I like the prose a lot more. It's, yeah. I know Asimov did a lot for the genre, and I think there's some really interesting ideas in Foundation, but I think Ruocchio could take the basis, the foundation, if you will, of those ideas of Foundation and turn it into something that I think would be even more exciting. So yeah, I'd totally be down for a Foundation by Ruocchio. Next up, we have, let's see what we have here, Dune. Imagine if Dune was written by, see if we can find an author here, Cixin Liu. Okay, so Dune, written by Frank Herbert. It is very rich in its world building, its themes, its characters. Cixin Liu, his writing, I've only read The Three-Body Problem, but seems to focus much more on the physics, the ideas. I think this is a bit of a weird mishmash because the only thing that stops, I mean, Dune is great, but the only thing that stops it being at the very top of my favorite books of all time list would be the plot was maybe a little bit slow for me. I'm not sure Cixin Liu would change that all that much. I'm not sure he would really get the most out of the themes, the world building of Arrakis. If there was a more physics science dependent story, maybe Cixin Liu could kind of bring that to life, but that's not really the story that Dune is. So I like both authors, but I think this one would be worse. Moving on, we have, let's see, 2001 A Space Odyssey. Imagine if 2001 A Space Odyssey was written by William Gibson. Okay, so we have Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 A Space Odyssey. We're in space, we have the monoliths, we have some kind of big existential ideas, humans, our place in the universe, and William Gibson, very technology-heavy, cyberpunk. I think some of the in-space technology Gibson might enjoy writing, but I think in terms of the story, in terms of the style, this is a bit of an odd mismatch. I like Arthur C. Clarke's writing for the ideas, what it makes me think about myself, the world, the universe, kind of really high concept stuff. And I think Gibson is kind of much more focused, much more targeted on building that cyberpunky, grungy world, kind of technological world building. So I'd read it, I'd be interested, but I think this is another one that I'm going to have to say would be worse. Okay, what does the hat have for us next? We have Red Rising. Imagine if Red Rising had been written by John SCALZI. Okay, so Red Rising, despite having a bit of a YA cover and branding, I don't think this is a very YA book series at all. I think it's quite dark, especially as the series goes on. John SCALZI, kind of a funny guy. I've only read Old Man's War, but there's some interesting sci-fi concepts, and he definitely goes for a lot of humor. I don't know if it all lands, but he can be quite humorous at times. Red Rising. What if Red Rising was funny? I mean, SCALZI might not try to make it funny, but I feel like he would. No, I don't think I'd want to read that. I'm going to say that would be worse. I'm not loving all of these combinations so far. Let's see if we can come up with a good one. We have, let's see, The Martian. What if The Martian was written by Joe Haldeman. Okay, I can kind of see this. So we have the Martian, we have Mark Watney, he's trapped on Mars, everything is going wrong, he has to do whatever he can to survive, and he does so kind of with tongue-in-cheek, kind of dark, sarcastic sense of humor. Joe Haldeman, writer of The Forever War. It's a much more serious book. It's about the experience of war in space. There's a lot of things to do with time dilation. I think he would do the survival aspects of this story quite well, and I think he would probably get a decent amount of the science down to in a fairly readable way. It's just, can Joe Haldeman write one character? Well, I don't know. I think Mandela's a pretty good character in Forever War. I think this one would be okay. I think it would be very different in tone. I don't think Haldeman would write it as funny. I think it would be more an intense, dramatic survival thriller, but I think he would do a good job. I can't say I think it would be better, but I think it would be good. I would read this one. Up next, we have the book Neuromancer. Imagine if Neuromancer was written by Blake Crouch. Oh, this would be good. This would be so good. Okay, Neuromancer. I love the idea. I love the cyberpunk aesthetic, but this was just a bit of a slow read for me, a bit of a tough read. I think I might appreciate Neuromancer more on a reread because the themes are really rich, the ideas are really rich. I just didn't really connect with Gibson's writing style. It is quite tough to read. Maybe I'd have a better go of it the second time around. But man, Blake Crouch, he'd make that an easy read. He'd make that a fun read. I'm sure that the pacing would be faster, the plot would feel exciting, and I'd really get the most out of those ideas. So yeah, big fan of this. Blake Crouch, if you want to rewrite Neuromancer, go for it, my friend. The hat's starting to do a bit of a better job. Let's see what combinations we have next. We have Dark Matter. Oh, we just had Blake Crouch. Dark Matter, but instead of Blake Crouch, what if it was written by Arkady Martine? So Arkady Martine, writer of A Memory Called Empire and A Desolation Called Peace, which I just finished recently. I love those books for the characters, the themes, the prose. Dark Matter, though, it's a very concept-driven book. It really is about that big idea, that big concept, very science-heavy, super fast-paced how Blake Crouch wrote it. Arkady Martine's book, even though I really like them, they're kind of slow to medium pace. I think this is a case of a writer that I like writing a story that I don't think would necessarily suit them. She could pull it off because she's very talented, but I'm going to have to guess that this one would be worse. Okay, let's shake things up a bit. Pun intended. We have A Memory Called Empire. Okay, a lot of these are going back to back. A Memory Called Empire, not written by Arkady Martine. What if it were written by, let's see, Arthur C. Clarke? Okay, so I think Arthur C. Clarke would do a good job of conveying the ideas. I love his high concepts. I love the way he explores things that affect us both as individuals as well as on a universal level, and I think some of that comes through in the Tchaikovsky series. More so the sequel, A Desolation Called Peace, than the first one, A Memory Called Empire. A lot of it is about the perspective, the characters though, and that's not really Arthur C. Clarke's strength. I think he would nail aspects of this, but in A Memory Called Empire we spend so much time with just a small group of characters. You really need those to be fleshed out for that story to work. And Arthur C. Clarke's one of my favorite writers, but characters isn't necessarily his strength. So I'm going to say this would be worse. Coming up next, we have, let's see here, Ender's Game. What if Ender's Game had been written by James S.A. Corey? So I think that's quite a good matchup. James S.A. Corey, Daniel Abraham, and Ty Frank, the writers of the Expanse series, they're in the right area. The space opera, I think some of that would cross over to Ender's Game. I think they were maybe slightly a little bit influenced by Ender's Game, not too similar. So I think that they would do probably a pretty good job of writing the tactical battle scenes, the practice scenes at Battle School. I think those would probably turn out pretty well. But I think Orson Scott Card did a much better job of writing the characters and the themes. That's not one of the highlights of The Expanse for me. I don't think they do a bad job. I am fairly attached to the crew of the Rocinante, but Ender, Bean, all the great characters that you have in Ender's Game, I think they're done on a really deep level, and Expanse is a little bit more fun. I think corny or cheesy is being a bit unfair to it, but I'd say it's a little bit lighter. It doesn't have the weight, for me at least, when I read Ender's Game. So I think this one would be pretty good. This is not a bad combination, but I'm going to say it would be slightly worse. Okay, I haven't really been keeping track. I think we're about halfway through. Let's see if we can get a good one. Okay, Children of Time. What if Children of Time had been written by Adrian Tchaikovsky? That's a tough one to picture. I'm not sure what that would look like. I don't know the odds of that happening. We do have 20 different authors, 20 different books. Maybe one of those would line up eventually. I guess I'll put that back in the hat. Yeah. Good book though. It turned out pretty well. It's a good combination. Gonna do a bit of an extra shuffle after that one. We have The Three Body Problem. Imagine if The Three Body Problem had been written by Dan Simmons. Okay, so Dan Simmons, I'm a big fan of Hyperion, the Hyperion Cantos. And in those books, in that series, we have a lot of different genres. It kind of feels like space opera, horror. We have some fairly science-heavy stuff. We have some philosophically heavy stuff. And yeah, The Three Body Problem, it kind of has that too. It's a little bit less focused on the plot and the characters, but the ideas, the themes, the science. I think Dan Simmons maybe doesn't have as much of a scientific background, but I think the way the philosophy is explored could be done really well. And I think maybe the characters would come to life a bit more. I think each of the tales that we get in the Hyperion story, I think each of those characters are so fully realized. And some of the characters I kind of connected with in The Three Body Problem, but that's not really the focus. They don't have the most personality. So I think Dan Simmons would add to it in that way. I think there'd be some sacrifices. I think he'd sacrifice the science a little bit for the characters, so that might be a little bit of a personal preference. I'm going to go better, slightly better. They're both great, but I'm going to go Dan Simmons. He'd make The Three Body Problem just a teeny bit better. Okay, up next we have, let's see here, Slaughterhouse 5. Imagine if Slaughterhouse 5 had been written by Andy Weir. Okay. This is a weird combination. So, Slaughterhouse 5, written by Kurt Vonnegut. It is kind of in a way semi-autobiographical based on his experience in World War II, but you also have some awesome sci-fi concepts, the character becoming unstuck in time, so time travel in a way featured in the story. Quite dark, kind of darkly funny at times, but a pretty heavy book. And I know Andy Weir's funny, but it's a very different sense of humor. I love Andy Weir. I think his plotting is great, pacing is great, humor is great, and his science is on point, but I kind of just think this would be a horrible combination. I gave Project Hail Mary a 10 out of 10. I like the guy, but I just don't think Slaughterhouse 5 is the right story for him to tell. It's pretty unique to Vonnegut, so this will be way worse. I think we got about 5 or 6 left. Let's see what we come up with. We have Old Man's War. Imagine if it had been written by George Orwell. Okay, this is another odd pairing because Old Man's War, it's quite funny. It's a story about senior citizens getting recruited into the military to fight a war in space, and it's quite science heavy, it's quite concept heavy. Whereas George Orwell's writing is much more about society. I think the themes are a lot heavier. I think the type of writer that Orwell is would not really lend itself to this kind of comedic sci-fi space opera in a way. Yes, I think this is a bad matchup, a bad mix. I'm going to say this is worse, much, much worse. All right, let's find out what we can combine next. We have, let me see what we have here as it gets stuck in the hat. We have Hyperion. Imagine if Hyperion had been written by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So I think Adrian Tchaikovsky is a very versatile writer. He writes fantasy, he writes sci-fi, he writes hard sci-fi, he writes soft sci-fi. So I think as far as authors that go that could be picked to write Hyperion, Tchaikovsky is a pretty good one because Hyperion is so many different genres. It's sci-fi, space opera, romance, horror, thriller, very philosophical, but you can also have a lot of action. And I think Adrian Tchaikovsky would definitely be up to the task. Would it be better though? Because Hyperion, it's pretty close to perfect, or at least the series as a whole. I like the more I like Fall of Hyperion more than Hyperion because you get a more satisfying ending. But that's just me. Some people like the more somewhat open-ended ending of Hyperion. But let's say that Tchaikovsky can't just wrap it all up in one book. He would need to do the series. I'm going to say it's not going to be quite as good, but of any of the names that I picked out, I think Tchaikovsky is probably going to be the one that would come the closest to. So slightly worse, but good effort, hypothetical Tchaikovsky. Okay, I think we've got about 4 left. Let's see what we have here. Leviathan Wakes. Imagine if Leviathan Wakes had been written by Pierce Brown. Okay, I think I can see this. They are James S.A. Corey, or Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, and Pierce Brown, all modern authors, all write fairly accessible, fast-paced, action-based series. So I could see Pierce Brown doing a pretty good job of The Expanse. I think it might be a little bit heavier, a little bit more violent, but I think a lot of the aspects would stay fairly similar. I think he would do a good job. I don't think it would be way better, but yeah, I'm going to say Pierce Brown. It would just make The Expanse. Oh, Leviathan Wakes is so good, though. It's my favorite of the ones that I've read so far. Oh, this is a pretty close to a push, actually. Push. If you force me to choose, actually, I'm going to say Leviathan Wakes. It would be better without Pierce Brown. Okay, the whole series, The Expanse, slightly better, but because it's specific to the book, slightly worse, just because I think the first one is so good already. I think I counted wrong. I think there was more than 4 left. But anyway, moving on. We have, let's see what we have here. Children of Time, hopefully written by someone other than Adrian Tchaikovsky. We have Frank Herbert. Okay, imagine if Children of Time had been written by Frank Herbert. So Herbert is a master of themes and world building. I think Dune is so rich, and creating the spider universe in particular, I think he would do a really good job of. And maybe he might even make the human storyline more exciting too, because I think it ended really well, but while I was reading the book, I found the humans to be slightly less interesting than the spiders, and he might improve that. I like the ending of Children of Time more than the ending of Dune. I don't know if that's a hot take, but presumably Frank Herbert gets to use the ending of Children of Time, which is already awesome. So yeah, I don't know. Children of Time is basically perfect already, or pretty close to. I think I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. Would Frank Herbert make it a 10? I don't know about that. This is gonna be a push. You know, I don't know. Tchaikovsky's earned my trust. Children of Time is so close to being perfect already. I think it'll be slightly worse, but still really, really good. I would definitely read Children of Time written by Frank Herbert. All right, here we go. We have, let's see, Empire of Silence. Imagine if Empire of Silence had been written by Ursula K. Le Guin. So Ursula K. Le Guin, I've only read The Left Hand of Darkness, and I really like the premise, and I think she explores themes in a deep way. I think she writes interesting characters, but I did not really connect with the story as much as I wanted to. Thought it was a little bit slow, and I'm sure it was groundbreaking for the time. I think it's definitely influenced a lot of what came after it, but reading it in 2021 or 2020, whenever I read it, it didn't seem as original to me, but that's just one of the issues of being a modern author reading a classic. Empire of Silence. I love Empire of Silence so much. I think she would nail aspects of it, but I think the plotting would be a lot slower, and for this grand sci-fi, fantasy, space opera, I think you need that, especially in such a chunky book that's 700 pages. You kind of need to keep the pace up, or else that could be a bit of a grind. So Ursula K. Le Guin, great writer, but I think for me, this one would be worse. Let's keep it rolling with the book 1984. Imagine if the book 1984 had been written by Philip K. Dick. Ooh, okay. I know this is kind of a weird combination, but Dick is kind of the master of weird. He is so crazy. He is so out there. And I think the whole concept of Big Brother and surveillance, I think is something that he would really enjoy writing. I think we get some of that in A Scanner Darkly. I haven't read the book, but I have watched the film and I loved it. So I'm excited to read the book probably later this year. I think he would do a really good job of this. I think it would be weirder, maybe funnier, and I can't say it would be better because I think 1984 is one of the best sci-fi books ever written, but this is another one where of any of the people that I could have picked, out of the hat, I think Philip K. Dick would be one of the best, and it would be one of the most interesting. I'm going to say it will be slightly worse, but I would still absolutely read 1984 by Philip K. Dick. Moving on to our third last combination, we have The Man in the High Castle. Imagine if The Man in the High Castle had been written by Isaac Asimov. Okay, so I do like Philip K. Dick. I absolutely loved Ubik, but The Man in the High Castle was a little bit underwhelming to me. I love the premise for it, but for me, it didn't really deliver on that premise. Isaac Asimov, I think his strength as a writer is the ideas. So I think if you give him a great idea, such as the premise of The Man in the High Castle, what if the Axis powers had defeated the Allies in World War II? What would that look like? And much more. I think he would do a great job of this. I like Foundation. I don't love it, but I think of the books that Isaac Asimov could have been given, I think this is one that would suit his strengths. So I'm going to say I would read this. Isaac Asimov, Man in the High Castle, would be better. And our second last combination is, let me see here, we have The Left Hand of Darkness. Imagine if The Left Hand of Darkness had been written by Kurt Vonnegut. So, as I just mentioned a couple minutes ago, Left Hand of Darkness, I like some of the ideas, but this isn't one of my favorite books, whereas Kurt Vonnegut is one of my favorite writers. So, would he make it better though? Is this a good fit? Well, The Left Hand of Darkness explores some social issues, some things around gender, and perhaps it would be a female author would offer a unique perspective on that. But I do think as far as the authors in this hat go, Kurt Vonnegut, definitely someone that does explore social issues as well. Very, very conscious about individuals, society, and even though he does have some crazy sci-fi concepts, he writes very personal stories as well. So I think I would enjoy this more. I don't know if everyone would like Kurt Vonnegut's Left Hand of Darkness, but I just think he's so honest, so funny, one of my favorite writers. I think he could really bring this story to life in a way that at least I would enjoy. So I'm going to say this one would be better. And with our final imaginary combination, we have the book, let's just pull them both out, The Forever War. Imagine if The Forever War had been written by Orson Scott Card. So I think this is a good one. I think this is a good combination. I think Orson Scott Card maybe in some ways was influenced by The Forever War. I can see some vague similarities between that and Ender's Game. And I think Orson Scott Card, his pacing is fantastic, his characters are fantastic. I think this is a universe that he would be comfortable writing in. I think it would like the personal touch. I think obviously Joe Haldeman's experience in the military writing about the Forever War is a significant strength of his. So I think maybe it would lose some of that personal realism perhaps. But I think if you have the base beats, the outlines of the story, the things that Orson Scott Card needs to hit, even though they're not his personal experiences, I think he would do a great job of writing them. I think this would, I really like Forever War, but I think this could be slightly better. So I'll read this one. I'll read The Forever War by Orson Scott Card. So there you go. Those are all of my 20 sci-fi book and author combinations. Thank you, Powell's Hat. Let me know what you think. Let me know, what do you think was the best combinations we came up with, a book that you would really like to read from that list, and what was the worst? What did you think, this is a terrible matchup. I would not want to read this book at all. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and you can check out more sci-fi content over here.